This is Gemara in Makkkos, Daf Yod Aleph. We pulled up a little bit early in yesterday's Daf, about 15 lines from the very wide lines. The first word on line is Ze Devar Haroitzeach. And today's shir should be an incredible Zchus Refuah Shalema. We should continue saying Yeshuais and ultimately culminating Refuah Shalema Gemura B'siyata Dishmaya for Tinok ben Miriam Ahuva. Says the Gemara, Amar Mar Bishkaga B'maisel Yadai. In the previous story, it was a shoygeg that the Maisa came to their hands and asks the Gemara, Pshita, Tibe Mezid Bar Galasu. If it was a Mezid, of course there'd be no Galus. Answers the Gemara in, yes, there could be a case of Mezid that there would be Galus. V'atani Rav Yehuda. And the Brisa explains, as the Brisa says, Yehuda teaches B'tchila, when originally there was a case of murder, and then, so the first step would be everyone would run to Ari Miklat, and then Bezdin Shalchan Mevinai Samisham, Bezdin would take them from there. Mishan is Chayiv Misa Hargayu would get killed. Shene'amar v'shalchzikni yer v'lachoy samisham v'nasos aviyad goyal adam umeis mishaloi nischayev patrua shene'amar v'tzilo eidas eretzeach miad goyal adam misha nischayev kolos chsir nesalim mekaymai would be sent back to Ari Miklat shene'amar v'shivos eid el mir miklatai asher nas shama. So the Gemara explains that there would be a case of a semi case of Ari Miklat for a Mezid would be the first step before getting to the Psak Halacha. Rabbi Aimer teaches Rabbi Me'atzon Gailin. Says Rabbi, a similar svara, but originally they would go to Galus right away, even if someone killed a Mezid. Because they thought, hey, they thought that Ari Mikla would work whether it was a Mezid or a Shayig. However, they did not know Shayig Kaltais, B'Mezid ain't Kaltais. The city would not save them if it was B'Mezid. Omar Rabbi Elazar Anu Din teaches the Gemara. Here Sheruba Reitzchin Einoi Kaltais. If we have a city, if we have an Ir Miklat, that the majority of the people in that city are murderers, are reitzchin, the city loses its power. Says the Gemara Shenem, as the pasuk teaches us, v'diber ba'aznei ziknei yira he as tavarav, v'lo yeshu dveim l'tavarav, and it can't be that all their words, that the reitzchin, that the ziknei yira, that they're all the same. And in a scenario in which there would be reitzchin, that would be the case. Lo yeshu dveim. V'amar Rav Elazar, and Rav Elazar teaches another din. Ir she'in bazakinim eina kaltais. Why? Tibin ziknei ir v'lekva. Itmar. Ir she'in bazakinim Rav Amir azichanam kaltais. We have machlaik azichanam eina kaltais. So l'mandam eina kaltais bin ziknei ir. We understand that v'lekva. L'mandam kaltais. What is the reason? That he learns mitzvah ba'alma. It's a mitzvah, but it wouldn't necessarily make the city not have its power. So it continues the Gemara of Yershin Bazakin Rav Rasi Chada Omar Nasva ben Saramayr. In a similar vein, you need the Zikni ear for Ben Saramayr. So one holds you could have Ben Saramayr, but Chada Mei Nasa Ben Saramayr. Leman Damei Nasa Ben Saramayr. Why? Bina Zikni ear Velek. Leman Nasa Ben Saramayr. And the first very wide line, what's the reason? Mitzvah Alma Vir, Mitzvah Alma. And a third halacha about a city without Zakin of Yershin Bazakin Rav Rasi Chada Omar. Mevi Agla Rufa, V'chadamena Mevi Agla Rufa. L'manda Mevi Agla Rufa Bina Zikneir V'leka L'manda Amar Mevi Agla Rufa Mitzvah Ba'alma. So three different halachais that pin and center around whether there are Ziknei Ha'ir. Continues the Gemara Amar Rav Chama Bar Chanina Neiman Emra B'Parshas Reitzch. What is the reason that it says in the Torah and the Parsha that deals with murderers as we turn over to Yud Aleph and Aleph B'Lashain Azah? What is the reason that the Psukim in Yeshua talk in a very strong manner? Explains the Gemara, as the pasuk says, Yeshua. As the pasuk teaches us that Hashem spoke to Yeshua Lemar saying, Daber al bnei Yisrael, Yeshua, speak to Klal Yisrael, Martinu Lachem as Ari Miklat. Give them the Ari Miklat Shadibarti Alechem that I said to you. Mipnei, you know the reason why the Torah speaks in such a mannerism. Shehein Shel Torah. The words of Torah. This was telling Yeshua to fulfill a tzivoy of Hashem. Explains the Gemara, Lemeimer the Chaldibur Lashon Hazah. Does this mean to say that every dibur, every time Hashem commands to do something, it's always in a firm language? Says Gemara, in Kidachsev Daber Ish Adoni Haaretz Yitanu Kashois. Ve'atani, I ask Gemara 1 second. Nidabru, Nidbru, Ein Nidbru Ella Lashon Nachas. Chenu Oimer Yidaber Am Tachtenu. Davar lechod and yidaber lechod. Daber will be azol, will be strong, and yidaber will be bin nachas. Continues the Gemara with a bunch of simanim. The Gemara brings down imachleges. Pligi bar Rav Yehuda v'Rabbanan. Chad Omar, one says, mipnei sheham. The reason why Yeshua is told in this firm language is because he was shaha. He delayed. He didn't create the Ari Mikla right away. V'chad Omar, Nation shall Torah, like we saw before. Another machlokes. Pligi by Rav Yehuda Rav Nechemia. Chad Amar Shemayin Psukim. Chad Amar Ir Miklat. One opinion holds last 8 psukim. That is what it says that when Yeshua wrote these psukim. So explains the Gemara famously. Moshe Rabbeinu is nifter, and Yeshua is pinned with the incredible task of completing the last 8 psukim in the Torah. But says the Gemara, what does that mean? Explains the Gemara, these words that were in the Sefer Torah Zalikim, he wrote that which is written in the Sefer Torah. And a third machlokes involving Rav Yehuda, Sefer Shetifra Pishton, that's sewn together with a linen. Again, this is a random halacha that's being brought down here because it's the same Rav Yehuda machlokes. Chad Amar kosher, v'chad Amar pasul. L'man Amar pasul, why d'chsev? L'man tiyater Hashem beficha, v'sich kol tarakul l'tfilin, and therefore, ma tefillin lachum shemisin l'tafra begidim has to be sewn with the sinews of an animal. I've called l'tafra begidim with a kosher animal. V'edach no kitkish l'muta l'beficha l'hilchaisav lo yitkish. Then what is this hakish l'kol tarakula? To tefillin is lemutar beficha, has to be parchment on an animal that is mutar. However, when it comes to the linen, it does not exclude it. Leil chaysav loy itkish. And Amar Rav concludes part A of today's shiur. Chazinu letefillin chavivi tetfiri bekisna. That I saw they were sewn together with linen, but concludes the Gemara, this was incorrect. But let's hilchasa kavosei. And we continue with the Mishnah, which now brings us back to our original topic, which are the halachas of Ari Miklat. We had a little bit of a segue, some agadata, some sidebar dinim. Now we learn at what point one leaves Ari Miklat. Continues the Mishnah, Echad Mashuach B'Shemen HaMishcha, Kohen Gadol that was anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha, V'echad Amru B'Gadim, or the Kohen Gadol just wore the Shemayna B'Gadim, the investments of the Kohen Gadol, V'echad Sha'avar Mimshchaisav, or Kohen Gadol that's no longer serving, Machzir Nezareitzeach, any of these 3 Kohani Gedolim that are nifter, as Rashi fills in the blanks over here, Machzir Nezareitzeach with their death, as the pasuk says, after the Kohen Gadol dies, the Reitzeach returns, he leaves Ari Miklat. Rav Yehuda Merav Mishuach Malchama Machzir Nezareitzeach Lefikach, and because the death of the Kohen Gadol triggers all those in Ari Miklat to be set free, so what are they going to be davening for? The death of the Kohen Gadol. Lefikach teaches the Mishnah an incredible Yesod, Imoysein Shel Kayanim. The mothers maspikis lahen mechia v'ksos. The mothers would give them food and clothing, so that the people in Ari Miklat shouldn't daven, that their children, the Kohanim Gedolim, should die. And of course, we learn incredible Yesod over here. What, they're not going to die? This is their only ticket to freedom. The only way to leave Ari Miklat is the death of the Kohen Gadol. So because she bakes you some cookies, Because she gives you a new blanket, you're not going to daven. And from here, the Mefarshim, the Sfarim explain, Avada, they'll daven. But it won't be the same level. There'll be a dot less, a little bit mitigated, a little bit of comfort. Every dot, every ounce, every nikuda of tefillah makes a difference. Says the Gemara, immediately where we know this din from, Amar Avkana Damar Kra, Vayashav Ba, he stays in Ari Miklat, and Moiskai God. Uksev, Kibra Ben Klata Yashav, and Moiskai Gain Gadol. Uksev, a third pasuk, Vachemos Gain Gadol. Rav Yehuda, Ksev Kra Achrina, so that's the three cases of Fida Tanikama. According to Rav Yehuda, there's a fourth pasuk, Lashav, Lasheves, Baaretz, and Moiskai Kain. Ve'edach, what does Tanikama hold? Meloksev, Agadol, Chad Mehanachu, it's not talking about the Kain Gadol. And now we quote the final din in the Mishnah, which was the Fikach Imosein Shal Kahanim V'chulu, says the Gemara, Taima Deloi Matzlu, Ha Matzlu, Ha Mitzalu, but if they would daven, Maisi, then the Kohen Gadol would die. So the Gemara now asks a fundamental kasha, V'aksev Katibur L'noid Kidrar Lo'oif, Kain Kilas Chinam Loi Tavoi, the wandering bird, the flying swallow, an undeserved curse will not come. So says the Gemara, why should the Kohen Gadol die just because these tefillos are like an undeserved curse? Explains the Gemara in the third by law, I heard for the Shima of Rava Shailan Levaki Shrachlin Al Dairan V'loi Bikshu. Because indeed, at some level, Kehanim Gedelim are culpable, because they should have davened, and they did not, obviously, because there was inadvertent murder. V'ika Demasni. There's those that learn and there are those that learn that the mothers gave food and clothing so that those in Ari Miklat should daven, that the Kehanim Gedolim should not die because they're Chayim Misa because someone else died. Taima dematzlu, halo matzlu maisi. My Havlil Mevad says, what could the Kohen Gadol have done? What he's achrai for this murder b'shayeg? So explains the Gemara, Chamrina and Tovia Chatav Zingud Mangid. I don't understand. Tovia doesn't have Eira, and Zingud gets Malchus. Hasam Imri, or Neritzel, they said, Shchem Nisid, Nisim Nasib, Umegvai, Gazier. Shchem get married, and Magvai gets a circumcision. What's going on over here? Why is the Kohen Gadol the one dying? Because this guy's in Ari Miklat. I'm like, Husama me Pirke, the Rava Shmiali. You know what I heard at the Shir of Rava? Again, as we just mentioned, there was a person that a lion ate him 3 parsecs away from where the Rishub and Levi. Eliyahu Navi did not visit Rishub and Levi for 3 days. If you're in a location, if you're in a city when something happens, you're at some level responsible. Continues the Gemara, a little bit of a sidestep over here. Amar Rav Yehuda Merav. Kilas chacham afilu bechinam niba. A curse of a chacham comes in bechinam minala me'achiteifel. Shebeshah shekara David shitin kapat oima. Ba'ilim ishtei la'alma. Time David built and dug deep the foundations of the Beis HaMikdash. The world, the Kafa Tahayim, the deeps of the world were threatening to drown the world. Amar, David said, David HaMelech asks, what are we supposed to do right now? And throw it into the waters to have it subside. And then the water will stop. David HaMelech didn't know what to do. Like a Damar Midi no one said anything. Amar says David HaMelech, if you know what to say and you don't say, you should choke to death. Amar. We know famously to make shalom. What does the Torah teach us? Amra Shemi, says Hashem. My name should be erased. Alamayim. If the world's going to be destroyed, Amar Le'achidevil says Shari. David HaMelech listens, Kosav Shem Achas, and throws in the time. No Chas, the water stops to come out. Even still, the curse of David HaMelech was B'Tanai. But even still, Achidevil Ra, Kilo Nasasa, Itzosav Yichwesh, as Chamoiroi, Vayakav Yelech al Beisai, Val Ira, Vayitzi al Beisai, Vayichanek, and Achidevil chokes to death, a fulfillment of the curse of David HaMelech. Amar Avua Kilas Chacham Afilu Al Tanai Yiba. Another case, Minolan Mei Eli. Tkamar Eli Lishmol. Eli says, Kayasel Chalakim Chal Yosef Im Techached. So says Hashem, and so should he continue. Mimini davar. If he can steal anything from me, it was a curse. He wanted Shmuel to reveal the nevuah to Eli. Mimeni davar vaval gav. Tersev hayagiloi Shmuel es kol advarim. Shmuel Amaisa told him of the nevuah. V'lo kichen mimeni didn't hide anything of Filoachi, and still ksev v'loyalchuban of the drachav lamaisa. The curse came. The children of Eli, unfortunately, were not righteous. We turn over to Yidalf Amid Beis. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, a third statement. Nidoy al Tanai. Putting someone in Nidoy b'Tanai on conditions are chafara, even though it was a Tanai, and even though the Tanai was not met, still we need to annul the Nidoy. Where do we know this from? Says the Gemara Me Yehuda. Techsev im lo yavi Yosef elecha v'gomer. V'amar Shmuel Nachmini Amar V'Yinisan Mai Techsev. Chi Ruven v'Yamois. Sosilu dekolos and Mem Shana. All those 40 years that Yisrael Midbar. Atz Moisav Shal Yehuda Megarlin Barum were rolling in the Aroy. Not Sham and Moshe. Tell Moshe Rabbeinu gets up because of Rachman and Davin Zamar Levin Rabbeinu Shalaylam. Migaram the Ruven Sheyoidem. Who caused you Ruven to admit that he made a mistake? Who was that? It was none other than Yehuda after Reuven. So Yehuda he admitted as well. Yehuda Shama. Hashem called Yehuda. Alivra l'shafa. Lo avikam ayla lemisifta derikia. Excuse me. Alivra l'shafa. So Yehuda's bones stopped shaking. Lo avikam ayla lemisifta derikia. But then they were not allowing him into Mesifta derikia. Says Moshe vel tivenu vel amoy tivenu. Moshe Davins bring him to his people. Okay, so now he's in Shemayim, but he doesn't have the kayak to learn up there in Shemayim. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Yadav Rav Loi, Lavi Yadav Pruke Koshi can answer Bakasha. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, Vezim Yitzrav Tiyeh. And finally, Yehuda is elevated to his appropriate place in Gan Eden Shalmayla. Ibai Lahu concludes the second part, we'll call it of today's shir. Says the Gemara, is it that all three Kohanim Gedolim that were listed in the first part of the Mishnah have to die for the person Ari Biklat to be freed, or just one of them? Tashema says the Gemara, proves the Gemara. We learn to the next Mishnah that if someone goes to Galus when there was a dinai beloy kain gadol, when there was no kain gadol, he never leaves the Eilam. Says the Gemara, it must be v'misa. Now, if it's true that he leaves when any one of the kahanim gedolim are nifter lahadr bahanoch, then even if there's no acting kain gadol, let him leave with the other death of the kahanim gedolim. So proves the Gemara must mean that all three have to die, and says Gemara, no, Raya. Why? B'deleka. Maybe the Mishnah talking about there's no Kahanim Gedolim at all. Therefore, we don't have a Raya that you need to necessarily have all three Kahanim Gedolim to be nifter in order to leave Are Miklat. And we're going to conclude today's shir with one more Mishnah. About 10 lines on the wide lines on Yud Aleph Amid Beis. Mishenigdar Dina Meis Kain Gadol. If after the Roitzeach is Chayiv Galus, the Kohen Gadol dies, but he dies before the Roitzeach gets Ari Miklat. Harei Ze'enei Gadol, he doesn't have to go to Galus at all. Actually, Nigmar Dinai, but if Meis Kohen Gadol dies before the Psak Halacha, Umanu Achar Tachtav, they appoint another Kohen Gadol Achar Mikan, Nigmar Dinai, and then there's the Psak Halacha, he has to go to Galus. Chayzer Misasel Shasheni only leaves if the second Kohen Gadol is now Nifter. Nigmar Dinai B'loi Kohen Gadol. Let's say they pass these Chayiv Galus, there's no Kohen Gadol. Va'oirei Kohen Gadol. Or someone who kills the Kohen Gadol by mistake. Or the Kohen Gadol Shaharag. Ein lo yotz misham la'ilam. They never leave Ari Miklat forever. Ve'ein yotz elo leidus mitzvah leidus mamayin. And they're not allowed to leave Ari Miklat for any reason. Not even to give Eidus for a mitzvah, not for Eidus for a monetary case, Eidus nefashais. Va'afilu Yisrael shrichim loi. And even if a Klal Yisrael needs them. Va'afilu tzar tzava Yisrael kiyoyim in tzruya. If you are the Spitz general, still in Yotz Misham La'ilam Shenemar Shernas Shama. Sham Tehei Dirasai. Sham Te Misasai. Sham Te Kvurasai. That's where he's going to die. Shem She'ir Koiletas Kach Tchuma Koilet, says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, excuse me. Just like the Miklat itself is Koilet, saves him from the Goyal Adam, so too he's within the Tchum of the Arei Miklat. And then Matzah Goyal Adam, Rev Zikli Amar Mitzvah Biad Goyal Adam, the Urshos Biad Kol Adam. Kol Adam is a mitzvah to kill him, and any person has a Urshos to kill him. Kiva Imer Urshos Biad Goyal Adam, B'chol Adam, and anyone else, Chayav and Alav is in the Maisa, not let it kill him at all. And we'll do one last shtickle before we call it a day. My Taima, says the Gemara, what is the reason? The first in the Mishnah, Amar Abaye, Kal v'chaimer, about the Kohen Gadol. Ma misha goli kvar yotza. Achshav, if you already went to Galos, he goes. Achshav misha legal, if you didn't go to Galos yet, eno din shlayigla. Once there was a psak, then the Kohen Gadol dies, he doesn't have to go to Galos. Says Gemara, wait, says the Gemara, maybe it's he doesn't get anything. If he didn't go to Galos, he doesn't get that kapara. Answers Gemara, me the Galos kamachapri. No, he says kayenu de machapra, and therefore once there's a psak halacha, he'll indeed be allowed to leave Ari Miklat with the death of Kohen Gadol. Pick it up from here, b'siyata dishmai.